You are listening to Leading the Factory Forward with your host, Lynn Friest. We share interviews with manufacturing experts and strategies for embracing the digital future, recruiting a new workforce, finding new business. Lynn is an advanced manufacturing strategist and leadership consultant who is on a mission to show manufacturing leaders how to improve their current operations while preparing for a digital future. And here's your host, Lynn Friest.
Welcome to this episode of Leading the Factory Forward. This is episode 39. It's part 3 in our framework around developing your leadership foundations. And today's episode is going to be on focused work. Now, as you've probably been realizing in several of these episodes, these are subjects I've talked about earlier, but I wanted to expand on them and put them into a framework for you to help construct your leadership framework. Again, our goal is to help you build your leadership skills, both for yourself and for your organization as we try to create a great future for ourselves. Just a quick review. The first episode was about habits of mind. The second episode was about habits of action. This one is going to be about creating focus, energy, and momentum through deep or focused work. And then the final one will be about skills to lead yourself and others. I've come to think of this as working with humans. It also involves emotional intelligence. So in this episode, how are you going to create focused work and get the important things done that really are critical in your business and in your factory? So I'll go over 3 key concepts today. And of course, there are many other concepts and things that could inform our thinking, but we'll just use 3 for today. The first one will be deep work. We'll talk about that, how to do it, and what it is. We'll also talk about distractions, the things that literally keep us away from doing our deep work. And then finally, we're going to talk about some strategies for learning. And these are areas where in today's world, we often have to learn something new, both ourselves and our teams. So what are some strategies we can use to do that? So in this episode, we're going to be talking about how you might create your method to do this and what are the practices that seem to help in these things. Now, I've worked in manufacturing for many years and also spent some time in labor relations, and I know my work tended to just show up at my door or in phone calls or in emails. Each day, these things kind of drove what I did, but it often kept me from approaching some of the more important things that I needed to do to, again, have long-term impact and make things better for the future. So, in your case, it may be that you need time to prepare for a client, how to talk through how you're going to sell or serve that client. It may be that you need to think through how to talk to your employees. How are you going to present them with what the organization needs to do next? Or in the case of an individual employee, how they might improve and grow or what's required of them. And finally, it may be that you need to get a commitment from a client or an employee or even a colleague to do something. How are you going to offer a compelling case for them to make a commitment to you? And then again, as we look towards the future and how do we create the future, how are you going to inspire and engage others? Some of you may just come by that naturally, but I bet all of you could use some focus time to really think through how you're going to do that. The second thing we're going to talk about is distractions. The things that keep us from doing our focused work. And then finally, again, we'll talk about what's the learning process we might use to help us learn new behaviors, new skills, new knowledge. So in deeper focused work, I'm basically, as I mentioned in an earlier podcast, referring to a book called Deep Work by Cal Newport. And he talks about how we actually get important work done that creates our most valuable contribution. Really thinking about where is your highest value being added to the business. Now, if your day is consumed by running around chasing lost parts, is it sitting at your desk answering emails? Or, heaven forbid, does your highest value come from checking Facebook? I'm sure it doesn't. But the main thing is that deeper and more focused work is important because it really allows you to think through an issue, come up with a plan, and not just end up being in a totally reactive mode. And in today's changing world of business, just being in a reactive mode is probably not enough. You really need to be able to look beyond the horizon. And to do that, you have to do some focused work. Now, focused work doesn't have to be long periods of time. We're not talking about all day or even full days in a week. It can be as simple as starting with 25 minutes or even less. But starting with 25 minutes and saying, I'm going to eliminate other activities and I'm just going to think about this one subject for the next 25 minutes. So as leaders, we always want to be available and we always want to be responsive. But in most cases, you can carve out a period of time at some point during your day or week. And the first step is just literally to schedule it. Can't be done just randomly because those things get pushed aside. You need to say, what's my schedule for doing this deep or focused work? You probably need to look at yourself a little bit as to when would be the best time for you to schedule it. Find a time that's least likely to have a lot of interruptions, and a time where you're going to have some energy also. Generally speaking, I would not suggest scheduling it at mid-afternoon or end of the day, but sometimes that may be when things quiet down for you. You'll have to, again, look at your schedule. What's it look like? And you have to look at your own rhythms in life and see where are you most creative? Where can you best focus? Sometimes, again, mid-afternoon is not personally the best time for me to try to focus on things. Another thing, when we think about this creating deep work, is going back to the earlier things about habits. We need to create this as a habit. We need to decide to do it every day or week or month and schedule this period of time so you're looking forward to that. Again, just like anything else, once you've started, you keep reinforcing your ability to do this deep work, and it becomes more routine, becomes easier for you. Another success factor is telling people about it. Let your organization know, hey, I'm going to carve out 25 minutes or an hour to do some work, and please don't interrupt me. It's important that I get this done for all of us. You know, in my past work in the corporate world, I would even see people that actually scheduled a meeting with themselves in some conference room. They were literally the only attendee, but allowed them to block out an hour just to focus on what they needed to do. And another thing you can do is use others to help you be accountable for doing this and partner up with someone else. Could be one of your co-leaders in an organization. You might say, hey, I'm going to try this to make sure I get some important things done. Maybe you want to join me and we'll make this work happen for both of us. And in that, you can hold each other accountable. Now, finally, it could be that as you approach a period of focused work or a particular problem, you may want to do some preparation. You may need to gather some materials that will be useful so that you're not out just searching for information at the time you're trying to think through things. So it could be you want to have a prep time before your focused work. Again, I refer to a lot of this in episodes 26 and 29 of the podcast, so I encourage you to refer back to them if you'd like to see more about it. The next thing we'll talk about is distractions. And a big part of our success in doing deeper focused work has to do with eliminating or at least reducing distractions. Again, these things are not bad, they're not good, and they happen to us all the time. Simply, in my opinion, we've become a very distracted society, and whether it's our phone alerts going off or email alerts or just the normal day-to-day activity. And I understand if you're in a fast-paced manufacturing business, people have things that they need and they need to come to you. So here again, you have to be conscious of what are the things that actually distract you and do some things to try and modify that. Some of the obvious ones that we kind of mentioned earlier here is when you're settled in to do deeper focused work, turn off email. Turn off the notifications. And in fact, sometimes I turn my phone off entirely, so I'm not even tempted to look at it. Or put your phone in the desk drawer. And in addition, obviously, you may shut your office door, or you may go to a conference room where, people won't just be able to stop by. It's not that you're totally unavailable, but again, people will have to think about it before they come to talk to you. And as I mentioned earlier, doing focused work takes practice. And so practice and habits kind of fit together. So we really have to start training ourselves. A lot of it comes to we're in the habit of being distracted. So when I sit down for 25 minutes, I really need to practice that because my mind will automatically go, should I check email? Should I do this? Should I do that? Now, one of the things I recommend when people sense these things, and what I've used myself, is I've got a pad of paper sitting there. So if something comes up, and for whatever reason, I don't want to do it now, but I don't want to forget it, just make some notes to yourself and quickly and set it aside. I've seen studies in the past where they said after a distraction, it can take you more than 15 minutes to get back into whatever it was you were working on before. So you can see that literally would kill the whole focus session for you. So if you allow yourself to step away and come back, it takes time for your mind to reorient itself back to the problem at hand. So again, it's best if, at least during these focus sessions, that you don't step away. You stay in the focus session. Now, the last thing we're going to talk about today is what are some ideas for learning new things? And again, this is an excellent place to use for deeper focused work. My thinking on this comes from two books. One is called The First 20 Hours by Josh Kaufman, and another book is called Ultra Learning. And each of these books talks about strategies for how do you go about learning something new. And it's about the idea of how do you learn how to learn, really. Now, for example, it could be that I want to adopt a new marketing plan, or I need to adopt a new piece of technology for my business. Okay, how do I go about finding out about those ideas with not just randomly wandering around the internet, but how do I find a focused way to explore those ideas and learn what I need to? I'm not going to try to find out everything about additive manufacturing, but I have to start somewhere. So it could be that I just need a first session to explore the concepts of additive manufacturing. And then in the next session, I may need to know what are the best technologies to do metal additive manufacturing. You want to start with a plan for what you're going to do, so it's not just idly wandering around the subject. And have a target for at least a particular focus session. And again, the first focus session may just simply to create the plan for the follow-up focus sessions. Now, in the first 20 hours, Josh Kaufman talks about identifying what your current skill level is, where you're at right now. You might say, I have a general understanding of additive manufacturing, or maybe I really just have kind of a fuzzy concept, and I really need to find out more about what literally it is. But figure out where you're at, and then you can start breaking down the topic. What are the key things in that topic? One way to talk through this for yourself is just to start writing, what are the questions that I have about additive manufacturing? And this could just be a brain dump list of things, but just thinking about, what occurs to me that I need to find out? Again, use one session to plan out future sessions. But from there, with a list of questions, you can start saying, okay, I think I need to answer these questions in this order. So it really has some structure to your learning. And then we start getting down a lot more specifically as to what is this piece of knowledge I want to learn and how do I go about learning it. It could be that for my products, I need to know which of the 3 technologies are best and how they apply to additive manufacturing specifically for my 3 products. So then I need to start drilling down and find out what it is I need to know to make decisions about how to get these parts made, hopefully using this additive manufacturing technology. And then another thing is, say you want to learn new behavior, like I want to learn how to have better conversations with my employees. Well, you need to get feedback as you go along to let you know, are you making progress or not? So I may think about what are the best elements. I'll put together those conversations and I'm going to go out and try this out. And then I have to ask for feedback from someone saying, hey, did this work for you? Or is there, find trusted people to give you feedback on what you're working on. So another way, and I've used this before, friends have told me I need to be able to practice in public so I can get that feedback on what I'm learning and is it working. So now we've gone over these basic 3 things, deep work, distractions, and how to learn. So what are the first steps that you might do? Well, I'd say in terms of deep work, sit down and make a list of 3 to 5 things where you could really generate value for the organization. Or maybe you need focus time to work on 3 or 5 decisions that are in front of you. So those are the things. Just pick out 3 to 5 things and then say, okay, would a focus session help me have a better decision or have a better impact on doing this? Then as you think about distractions, I would suggest making just a log of distractions. Have a piece of paper next to you and notice every time during the day when your attention either wanders or gets pulled away. Generally, if you just pay attention to this, you'll end up with a list of 4 or 5 things that often take your attention away. And then you realize either it's a habit, you're distracting yourself, or others are distracting you. But once it's visible to us, then we can have some impact on minimizing it, or at least minimizing it during these focus work sessions. And then finally, around the idea of the first 20 hours are learning, find out what are several specific questions you have about an issue. And you may have gotten these from an earlier focus session, but then start dissecting those questions so that you can really say, okay, what could I think through or answer or practice in a 25-minute or a 1-hour session? So really get granular about what could I really do about this issue in 25 minutes. So again, this kind of wraps up this episode. I've given you a couple of ideas on what you could do first, referring back to this whole concept of doing deep or focused work to create the most value for your organization, how to avoid or at least minimize distractions that take us away and make us more of a reactive person than a proactive person, and then some strategies to how do you learn new tasks, new skills, new technologies. And I also recommend looking back to our previous episodes, 37 and 38, where we talk about habits of action, habits of thinking, and the books there, Atomic Habits and The Corporate Athlete. Each of them talk about how do you create new routines to be more effective in work. So our final session in this 4-part is going to be skills to lead yourself and others. Now, I've come to think of that as how do we work with humans? We can always figure out working with technologies or PowerPoints, but how do we really work with humans? And again, it gets back into the whole emotional intelligence. What are the key concepts that we want to use? So thank you for listening. I encourage you to both visit my website and download the PDF that is at the bottom of the podcast episode. And you can use these things as tools to help capture notes or spark your thinking as you think about these concepts from our podcast. So again, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.